Traveling across the desert wastes of Korriban, a group of 4 Sith Apprentices and their followers make their way to the last known location of fugitives who stole several munitions and artifacts that the Sith want back. At the halfway point to where Isaac had last sensed these fugitives, several of the companions of these Sith Apprentices comment on the current state of affairs as a raging sandstorm whirls around them.
Assessment. My photoreceptors are having a difficult time adjusting to these conditions.
As the HK-50 assassin droid says, whilst his eyes are lighting up and performing self-diagnostics mid-stride when pushing through the storm, threatening to clog all his metallic limbs with dust and sand. During which, one of the Sith Apprentices, Rakdaya, a red-skinned Sith pureblood, goes on to further comment.
This damn blasted sandstorm. It's a miracle that fool Cyrus was able to land the ship close enough to the location.
Barely hearing him over the whirring wind, Isaac could make out a few words to respond.
We're about 300 feet away from where I last sensed the people we're looking for. Don't worry. We'll be done with this quickly and back to the city.
Rakdaya has a questioning look on his face to doubt the speed at which this mission can be completed.
I hope so, because I've heard the stories of Korriban having vicious dark side creatures roaming the desert.
Upon hearing the stories retold by Rakdaya, the large hulking mass of Kem Val approaches the 2 Sith Apprentices from their flank and goes on to add a statement regarding the creatures that traverse the inhospitable terrain of Korriban.
Galut Saida, Iswis Us Uf Bendan, Ja Adnam, In Puidangarja.
Of course, he says this in his native language rather than in Basic or in the Sith language, since he had never bothered to learn to speak any other language. He can, however, understand Basic and Sith, as he was once a servant of Tulak Hord, a dark lord of the Sith, who had once ruled this world over 1,800 years ago. Being a Dashad, he is an extremely muscular being who has extreme resilience to the most toxic and hostile environments. So he struts past the 2 apprentices as if the storm has no effect on him. Standing about 8 feet tall with several odd metallic-looking implants strewn about the utter portion of his wide frame, he is an oddity for sure, perhaps the largest living Dashad in history, perhaps one of the only handful of Dashad left, because his homeworld of Urkup was destroyed during the Great Sith Wars over 300 years ago. From the result of Sith magic being done by Alima Keto, a Sith sorceress who used an ancient starship known as the Corsair to destroy the nebula once known as the Kron cluster. Thus, from the aftermath of the supernova, obliterating several planetary bodies, turning the once beautiful nebula into nothing but an asteroid field, which is now known as the Kron Drift. Curiously, Isaac asks HK-50 what Kem Val has just said, since the Sith Apprentice still can't understand the language of the Dashad.
Translation. He says that the creatures of this world don't frighten him and that he will feast on their warm flesh.
Cyrus Belal, another Sith Apprentice, interjects himself into the conversation.
Well, that's a comforting thought. I guess he will just eat everything we come across.
The last Sith Apprentice in this hunting party, Iroh Shen-Neo, speaks up to add to the conversation as he walks alongside his Imperial astromech droid.
Just make sure he stays out of my way. I don't want any surprises from him trying to gnaw at me in the midst of combat. Plus, I just don't want him messing up my attacks while I'm slashing at my enemies.
Cyrus does a slight smirk and chuckles to say,
Maybe you shouldn't have pissed him off so much on the ship. He looked like we was ready to swallow you whole.
He threw my damn astromech droid. He was practically asking for a fight.
Without even looking towards the direction of Iroh, as if he didn't matter enough to look at in order to respond to, or simply focusing on where he's going, Isaac says,
In any case, as I said on the ship, if you ever get into a fight with Kem, I will make sure to finish it.
You guys are insufferable sometimes. You know that, right?
In response to Iroh's frustration, the astromech droid beside him chirps in agreement.
Thank you. Although I don't know exactly what you said, but I'm sure it was something good.
Turning his head 180 degrees towards the direction of Iro, HK-50 annoyedly gives a translation to what the astromech said.
Exasperated translation. The little droid says he agrees with you on how the group can be, and I quote, insufferable, and how you should be treated with more respect. Was that translation sufficient for you, little angry meatbag?
If it wasn't for the raging sandstorm, Iro might have put both hands on his hips in a pompous and victorious way to further encourage his own self-importance merely as a result from his soul companion giving him praise. But he is barely managing to open his eyes whilst trying to shield his face with one arm. Making their way slightly further into the storm, the group comes across a large statue to their left-hand side, standing about 300 feet tall, with its head tilted downwards and its arms crossed across its chest. In that moment, Isaac picks up his comm link to put it close to his face, since the wind is getting too loud for anyone to hear each other unless they were mere inches away, and says to the rest of the group,
We're here finally at the Valley of the Dark Lords.
Trying not to sound too excited, Isaac makes sure to hide his exhilaration when entering the Valley of Sleeping Kings for the second time. As he had been here several days earlier during the Battle of Korriban, bypassing the starfighters and planetary turbo-laser defenses in order to enter the tomb of Naga Sado, which is where he found Kem Val, imprisoned and stationary for over 1,800 years waiting for his master. Tulak Horde to save him from such an agonizing fate, but to only get relief from an ambitious Sith apprentice wishing to gather artifacts and knowledge of the dark side. A companion of Cyrus, a Nautilon female pirate named Lakasha Barut, can barely tilt her head upwards to look at the large statue overhead. Being an aquatic species, she's having an especially difficult time in the dry, arid environment, but she goes on to comment,
Now that is one impressive-looking statue.
Cyrus looking to her confusedly asking,
I thought you were smuggling artifacts out of here for our empire.
Trying to shrug the best she can with sand blasting her from all directions, she goes on to say in a nonchalant way,
I never came down here personally. I just sent my crew to fetch the artifacts alongside some mercs. As you can see, I'm not exactly cut out for desert planets.
Major General Verbata, walking a pace behind them, tugs at her shoulder aggressively with one arm in order for her to look in his direction.
You don't really seem to be cut out for anything, so let that be a warning. Stay where I can see you.
As he says in a menacing tone to indicate that if she were to attempt to flee or betray his lord, he will blast her down like a Tukata pup without question or hesitation. She doesn't respond to the general's threats and warnings, but merely looks to Cyrus to raise one eyebrow.
We got a very tense and serious guy over here, huh? A little stiff for my taste.
As she says mockingly, but the Major General doesn't say another word as he has made his point. And as an Imperial Sith honor guard, he will surely keep to his oath. Isaac looking off into the distance, he can barely make out the large cliffside that led to the tomb of Naga Sado. And after his last voyage into the Valley of the Sleeping Kings, or more commonly known as the Valley of the Dark Lords, he made sure to do extensive research into the terrain and surrounding area in order to learn of the history, lore, and other possible wondrous dangers that could await the group.
There are several dark side creatures roaming this rocky valley. Watch out for any shifting sands or red eyes glowing in the distance. If you hear any howling or disembodied voices, make sure to ping everyone on the comm. Additionally, if you make out any hissing or deep guttural growls, I suggest you run and then circle back to try to communicate over the comm to rendezvous with the rest of the group.
Isaac can only hope that all that information was relayed over to the rest of the group over the communicator, but doesn't bother to double-check since he had learned early on in the Sith Academy, it's everyone for themselves, especially in a place brimming with such potent dark side energy. However, almost as if in response to Isaac's warning, the dark side grants an encounter with one of the beasts that traverse the rocky deserts of this ancient and dark valley. As the sand beneath them and around them starts shifting and bulging in all sorts of shapes and sizes, ranging from 1 foot across to as large as 8 feet across. Only a few in the group notice, And as Cyrus attempts to move quietly without attracting the attention of whatever is lurking beneath the ground, Isaac, Brakdaya, Chemval, and HK-50 all draw their weapons.
Commencing assassination protocols.
Sighing as if this could be another tedious task, Cyrus follows suit and ignites his lightsaber, as well as gesturing for the Major General and Lakasha Barut, or as he nicknames her, Lek, to also draw their weapons.